Welcome back to our Google Classroom. This time our topic is about learning in psychology. Definition: it is acquiring of knowledge. Learning is the acquisition of new behavior or strengthening or weakening of old behavior as the result of experience. Learning is the acquisition of habits, knowledge, and attitude. According to Crow, learning is relatively permanent change in behavior brought about by experience. According to Plotnick. Natures and characteristics of learning. Learning is a process. It involves all the experiences from birth to death produce a change in behavior. Learning makes change in behavior either V or negative V. Learning prepares an individual for adjustment and adaptation. All learning is purposeful and goal-oriented. The scope of learning is too wide. Learning is universal and is continuous. Learning does not include those changes that occurs as part of maturity. Factors affecting learning. Factors related to learner: age, motivation, intelligence, aptitude, innate and specific learning ability, maturation, physical condition of learner, mental health, emotions of learner. External factors: good physical environment, quality of teaching, social support, availability of resources. Factors related to method of learning: basic education, length of working period, repetition, learning methods. Types of learning: by verbal learning, the language we speak, communication, signs, pictures, symbols, words, figures, and etc. are used for verbal learning. Motor learning: driving a car, flying a plane, drawing using equipment, etc. Conceptual learning: it is a form of mental image which denotes a generalized idea about the things, persons, or events. Problem solving: a higher type of learning. It requires the use of reasoning, thinking, imagination, and generalization. Serial learning: learning alphabets, multiplication table, the name of states, country, list of prime ministers, presidents, etc. Paired associate learning: a learning of something in association with something else. Example: Ganga is River Ganges. Kishan Pho is Lord Krishna. Match the following: dog, parrot, milk, animals, birds, cat. Bloom's domain of learning: affective, psychomotor, and cognitive learning. To learn chess, one has to learn the rules of the game. That is cognition. How to hold and move the pieces of chessboard. That is psychomotor. Get involved in the game like the play. That is affective learning, according to the Bloom's theory. Informal learning: this is coming from parents, friends, peers, etc. This is formal school and teachers. Non-formal learning includes clubs, workshop, mutual interest group. Types of learning based on modes of learning. It is also called as theories of learning. The major classification are: A. Learning by trial and error. B. Learning by insight, learning by observation, by conditioning, Humanistic theory learning, the Rogers theory learning. The trial and error theory. The propagator of this theory is Edward Thorndike. It is the result of his experiments performed on chickens, rats, and cats. He put a hungry cat in the puzzle box. There was only one door. A fish was kept outside. The door was latched. The repeated movements made the door open. He repeated the experiments many times. The cat learned how to remove the latch and open the door. The Edward Thorndike's law of effect. The trial and error theory. Summary of the experiment. A. Drive. Intensified hunger due to sight of food. Goal: to get the food from outside the box. Block: close the door, latch. Random movements trying to get out the box. Chance success: first opening the door. Selection: recognizing the right movement to open the door. Fixation: learn to open the door. Laws of learning based on the experiment conducted. The law of readiness. Learning takes place when the person has a readiness to learn. Motivation is important in learning, the physical and mental readiness to learn. The law of exercise. Use and disuse or practice. Learning takes place through repetition and practice. Nursing skills. Learning. Classroom teaching is only introduction. The law of effect, satisfaction and dissatisfaction. Feeling is important, effect is important, satisfaction makes us confident. Feeling of self-worth. Theory of insightful learning. It is typical human learning and includes cognitive process. It is a type of learning or problem solving that happens all of a sudden by understanding the relationship between various parts of the problem rather than through trial and error. Plan and execute action before we get endangered. It includes holistic view of situation and generalization of conclusions. It is typical human learning and includes cognitive process. It is a type of learning or problem solving that happens all of a sudden by understanding the relationship between various parts of the problem rather than through trial and error, plan and execute action. It includes holistic view of situation, generalization of conclusion. The main propagator of this theory is Scholar. He did an experiment on chimpanzee called Sultan. The theory of insightful learning. Using boxes to reach banana. Different sizes of boxes. Using boxes and a stick to reach the banana. Longer and shorter sticks. This experiment follows some principles such as identifying the problem, organizing the pain of action, using insight. Theory of insightful learning. Factors affecting insightful learning. Experience, intelligence, learning situation, initial efforts, repetition and generalization. Learning by observation. We learn behavior through observation in addition to trial and error or insightful learning. A child may understand the effect of wrong behavior by seeing his friend getting punished for the same. Children learn an intimate behavior they have observed in other people or family members. Not all observed behavior is learned. Learning by observation mainly includes the aspects such as attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. Learning by conditioning. Most of the learning takes place through conditioning, such as sucking of the side of milk bottle, making grimaces in response to dislike, smiling in response to other smile, etc. The mechanism of conditioning is mainly classified into number 1, classical conditioning. This is a learning process that occurs when two stimuli are repeatedly paired. A response which is as the first elicited by the second stimulus is eventually elicited by the first stimulus alone. Second, operant conditioning. It is a type of learning where behavior is controlled by consequences. Key concepts in the operant conditioning are positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Classical conditioning. A classical conditioning is a form of learning in which people or any organism learns to associate two stimuli that occur in sequence. Classical conditioning occurs when a person forms a mental association between two stimuli, so that encountering one stimulus means the person thinks of the other. Conditioned to make people or animals act or react in a particular way by gradually getting them used to specific patterns of events. Terminologies used. Classical conditioning discovered by Ivan Pavlov in 1900s. Neutral stimulus, unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, conditioned response. The experiment on dog by Pavlov experiments. Element of this experiment: unconditioned stimulus, natural stimulus, the food. Unconditioned response, the natural response of salivation. Conditioned stimulus, artificial stimulus, ringing the bell. It is a substitute to natural stimulus. Conditioned response, the response to conditioned stimulus. Similar experiment by Watson. He took one infant called Albert. The baby was given with a rabbit to play with. Baby was happy and pleasant. He created a loud noise to frighten the boy as soon as the baby touched the rabbit. Baby was frightened. He repeated it for a number of times. Slowly the baby feared the rabbit, never came near to it. This elements of experimentation. Principles of classical conditioning process. Acquisition phase is the initial learning of the conditioned response. For example, the dog learning to salivate at the sound of the bell. Extinction is used to describe elimination of the conditioned response by repeatedly presenting the conditioned stimulus without unconditioned stimulus. If a dog has learned to salivate the sound of a bell, an experimenter can gradually distinguish the dog response by repeatedly ringing the bell without presenting food afterwards. Spontaneous recovery. Extinction does not mean, however, that the dog has simply unlearned or forgotten the association between the bell and the food. After extinction, if the experimenter lets a few hours pass, then rings the bell again, the dog will usually salivate at the sound of the bell once again. The appearance of an extinguished response after some time has passed called spontaneous recovery. Generalization. After an animal has learned a conditioned response to one stimulus, it may also respond to similar stimuli without further training. If a child is bitten by a large black dog, the child may fear not only that dog but the other large dogs. This phenomenon is called generalization. Less similar stimuli will usually produce less generalization. For example, the child may show little fear of smaller dogs. Discrimination. The opposite of generalization is discrimination, in which an individual learns to produce a conditioned response to one stimulus but not to other stimulus that is similar. For example, a child may show a fear response to freely roaming dogs but may show no fear when a dog is on leash or confined to a pen. Application of classical conditioning. Classical conditioning explains some cases of phobias, which are irrational or excessive fears of a specific object or situation. Classical conditioning explains many emotional responses such as happiness, excitement, anger, anxiety that people have to a specific stimuli. Classical conditioning procedures are used to treat phobias and the other unwanted behaviors such as alcoholism and addictions. To treat phobias or a specific object, the therapist gradually and repeatedly presents the feared object to the patient while patient relaxes. Through the extinction, the patient loses his fear to the object. In one treatment for alcoholism, patients drink an alcoholic beverages and then ingest a drug that produces nausea. Eventually, they feel nauseous at the sight or smell of alcohol and stop drinking it. Operant conditioning. Operant or instrumental conditioning is a type of learning in which voluntary behavior is strengthened. If it is reinforced and weakened, it is punished. The term operant conditioning refers to the fact that the learner must operate or perform a certain behavior before receiving a reward or a punishment. American psychologist Skinner became one of the most famous psychologists in history for his pioneering research on operant conditioning. In fact, he coined the term operant conditioning. This is a Skinner experiment on the rat. He designed a special puzzle box. It had a lever that, when pressed, provide a cup of water and food. Each time the lever is pressed, sound also was created. He put an angry thirst rat in the cage. At regular intervals, he used to press the lever and feed the rat. At a time, rat started doing itself whenever it felt hungry or thirsty. The sound associated with and the food, water acted as positive reinforcement. The principles of operant conditioning. Number 1, reinforcement refers to any process that strengthens a particular behavior, that is, increases the chances that the behavior will occur again. Positive reinforcement, a method of strengthening behavior by following it with a pleasant stimulus. Negative reinforcement is a method of strengthening a behavior by following it with removal or omission of unpleasant stimulus. Punishment weakens a behavior, reducing chances that the behavior will occur again. Positive involves reducing the behavior by delivering an unpleasant stimulus if the behavior occurs. Negative involves reducing a behavior by removing unpleasant stimulus if the behavior occurs. Shaping is a reinforcement technique that is used to teach animals or people behaviors that they have never performed before. In this method, the teacher begins by reinforcing a person or reinforcing a response the learner can perform easily, and then gradually requires more and more difficult responses. For example, to teach a rat to press a lever that is over its head, the trainer can first reward any upward head movement, then an upward movement of the least 1 inch, then 2 inches, and so on until the rat reaches the lever. Extinction is the elimination of the learned behavior by discontinuing the reinforcer of that behavior. A behavior learned is not always permanent. If a rat has learned to press lever because it received foods for doing so, the lever pressing will decrease and eventually disappear if food is no longer delivered. Generalization and discrimination occur in operant conditioning in much the same way that they do classical conditioning. In generalization, people perform a behavior learned in one situation in other similar situation. For example, a man who is rewarded with laughter when he tells certain joke at a bar may tell the same jokes at restaurants, parties, weddings, and receptions. Discrimination is learning that a behavior will be reinforced in one situation but not in another. The man may learn that telling his jokes in church or at a serious business meeting will not make people laugh. Application of operant conditioning. Parents, teachers, behavior therapists use shaping techniques to teach basic job skill to adults with mental retardation. Therapists use reinforcement to teach self-care skills to people with severe mental illnesses. To treat stuttering, marital problems, drug addiction, impulsive spending, eating disorders, and many other behavioral problems. The Humanistic theories of learning. This theory is propagated by Abraham Maslow. The behavior is the struggle to satisfy the different level of needs as given in the picture. Here is the picture. The Maslow hierarchy of needs. On the top of the pyramids is morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, acceptance of facts. That is self-actualization. Second level, esteem, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others. Number 3 level, the belonging to friendship, family, and sexual intimacy. Number 4 level is safety, security of body, employment, resources, morality, health, property. And last stage is physiological, breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. These are Maslow's hierarchy of needs of man. The Rogers theory of learning. It is basically a subtype of humanistic theory. Roger distinguished two types of learning as cognitive and experimental learning. Cognitive learning is meaningless unless it is applied. Example, mathematics, history, geography. Experimental learning includes personal involvement. It is self-initiated, self-evaluation. He believes in the strength and potentials of human beings like natural learning, inclination, and interest. The role of a teacher, parents, and well-wisher in learning are to help the learner in the changing desire for personal change and motivation. The learning should care and facilitate growth developments according to their requirements. Rogers' theory of learning. He classifies the role of a teacher as making favorable positive environment, making clear objectives of the learning, organizing learning resources, balancing intellectual and emotional components, sharing the feelings and thoughts of learner. He, the symbol of good learning, are minimum threat to the learner, good participation of learner, good performance in practical, social, personal, and research areas. Learner develop willingness to learn and utilize self-motivation. Transfer of learning. Transfer of learning or knowledge, training, and habits acquired in one situation to another situation. Example, ability to play the badminton can be transferred to play tennis. Type of transfer, positive transfer, previously learned benefits performance or learning of new things. Example, learning of basic science helps in learning higher education. Negative transfer, previously learned hinders performance or learning of new things. Example, child learns to pronounce but correctly but finds difficult pronouns put in the same manner. Zero transfer, the previous learning have no influence on other learning. Example, learning science and arts. Study habits. one habitual way of doing his study in a particular way and style may be termed as his study habit. The scholars and psychologists have found that the following principles to be followed as good study habits. Establishing proper time schedule for studying. Time management is a great art. It is useless to make such a comment as not getting enough time. We should be quiet, regular, devoted, and punctual to allow time for study. Observing desirable healthy habits for carrying out study in the planned time schedule. Study habits. Adopt a desirable mode. Time of note. Material making. There should be no stress or dependence on the mechanical memorization of the studied material. Use your insight. Practice makes the man perfect. Make a habit of revising and practicing the studied material. Better to study 3 or 4 subjects in a span of time of 3 or 4 hours. The change and variety will help creating interest. Love and respects your teachers. Maintain healthy, desirable body postures and position for study. It includes the place selected for self-study. Try to observe the principle of work and rest. Respect the individual difference. Studying early morning or late night. Studying in a silence or in music listening. Studying alone or with classmates. Reading silently or reciting louder. Don't feel jealous on other ability and don't be inferior. Study when you feel motivated, energetic. Don't try to study when you feel sleepy or stressed. Best way to learn is discuss with colleagues, teaching others, and practicing what you have learned. Thank you guys. And don't forget to answer questions at the end of this video. You can submit your answered paper right here in our Google Classroom via our email right here at sec.edo.ph.com. Alright, here's the questions for you to answer.